Hi everyone. Now I'm going to talk about a case of the matrix. And this matrix is controlled through TCP. So this driver is a TCP client driver. And for the TCP client, we need to open the connection first. Here is the function to open the connection. And we usually open the connection when the driver loads. So we call this open connection function in main here. And as I said before, when writing the driver, it's better to create a function to print the debug information. And here you can see the debug info function. And I've defined two parameters. One is the debug tag, and another one is the debug string. Here is to check the debug string is empty or not. If the debug string is not empty, then we need to check the debug flag. The debug flag is the flag to define, enable or disable the debug info function. So if this flag is true, we can see the variable here. I have defined a bool parameter called debug flag, and the default value is false. Then we back to the debug info. If it is true, then we print the debug information if we need. And if it is false, it will not print the debug information. And now let's come to the HDMI switch. This command is to switch the HDMI channel. And I set two parameters. One is input and the other one is output. The complete command is here on the here. And what we need is X and Y. So we just set X and Y as parameters. Then we put them together and send them out. This is the HDMI switch command. And for the check status, this is the command, and it is very simple. It doesn't need any parameter. And then, after checking the status, we need to parse the data that feedback from the matrix. So on message here, the Rx is the variable that I defined here, a string variable. And the data that the processor received is the byte data. So we need to convert it to string. And here I call parse IO correspondence. And let's see this function here. Every time you switch the HDMI channel, wherever you switch on the website or on the panel in front of the matrix will send this message to the processor. And we just need to get the input and output. So here we use string substring method to get the 1. Then convert it to integer. And the same to output. Then we use the driver event trigger to send input and output to the processor. And if we call the check status function, we'll receive these 4 messages. And there is a carriage return and line feed behind every sentence. Here is to parse the data, parse this data. The difference between this data and this data is the length. So we use the string length to distinguish between these two replies. And also, we need to avoid parsing other reply from the matrix. So we need to make sure that the reply is start with AV. Because we can see here, we can see the feedback. There isn't any other reply is start with AV except for these two. And then we use the driver event trigger to send input and output to the processor. Here is to print the debug information. And let's go to the UI designer. Here in driver events, we can see the feedback IO correspondence. This is the driver event we created in here. And here we can see there are two parameters. One is input and the other is output. And here we use the driver event trigger to send the input and output channel number to the processor. So here, we need to check. If the output is 1, then we need to check what the input channel is. So here, we use switch case. Switch the input and list out the case. If the input is 1, then let the toggle, which ID is 2, let it on. Is this toggle. And the same to others. For the control, here we can see we just need to call the HDMI switch function to switch the HDMI. That's all for the case of the matrix.